Okay, brilliant. So I'm hoping from all that everyone has been able to hear me talking throughout those polls. But if you could just let me know, that's really helpful to have that feedback. So if you could find the chat box and just let me know that you can hear. I'm getting some yeses already, which is a relief. And just when you're when you are sending messages to us, just make sure you're sending it to organisers only rather than to me or my colleague Jim, who is also in the call today individually, just because it allows us to see messages to both of us. So if you are having any issues with hearing or seeing the webinar, let us know. As I said, my colleague Jim is in the chat and he'll be able to kind of help with that, because it's difficult to monitor the chat while also talking about transitioning to university, which is the topic today. So I'm not going to go into Royal Holloway again, as I know that the majority of people have already been to one of our webinars, 79% in fact, so have probably heard a lot about Royal Holloway already. So I'm going to go into kind of what I'm actually going to be talking about today. And what I've done is sort of divided it into 5 areas of transitioning to university. So I'm going to talk about before you go, so what to actually think about in terms of packing and making sure finance is ready. Also going to look at studying at university, and I know probably quite a few people came to the webinar last week, which is all about study skills for university, so there'll be a very small amount of overlap, but not too much. It's just kind of a general introduction to studying. Going to look at social life, making friends, adjusting, well-being, and then extra sources of help, so things like disability and dyslexia service, academic support, well-being again, and then also just a little bit about what universities have been doing in the current climate in relation to COVID-19. So hopefully kind of a very holistic look at transitioning to university. And I'm, as always, if you've been to one of our webinars before, you'll know that we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So I'm very happy to answer questions on any of the content or just generally in relation to university. I'm going to kind of talk about lots of different things, so it's fine if you want me to expand on kind of any of the points I touch on. So let's start kind of where we are. Let's go through chronologically what you need to think about before you actually go to university. And once again, we've had a webinar all about student finance, but just to kind of go over the kind of things you need to think about in relation to student finance. So if you are applying for a student loan to cover your maintenance costs or your tuition fees, make sure you've applied, make sure it's all up to date, and if you have changed your course, make sure that's all up to date before you go. And if you're not aware, applications for this year's student finance are now open. So if you're a UK student and you're going to university in the UK, you can apply to apply for your funding now. And so in more detail, I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of how student finance works. Again, a lot of this may look familiar if you have already attended our student finance webinar, but I won't talk about it in loads of detail. But you can fund your studies in different ways. So if you are studying in the UK, as I said, you can apply for loans, so to cover your tuition fees, but also to cover your maintenance costs, which is your everyday spending. But there are other sources of funding as well, and again, it's good to figure all of those out now. So things like scholarships and bursaries are currently open for applications for people who are coming to university in September. So look into, are you eligible for scholarships? When are the deadlines? I know for a lot of our ones, they're April. And look at things like grants as well. So as you can see, there is extra support for students who have disabilities, who are carers, and also if you're funding your own studies, maybe look at kind of budgeting and saving up and making sure you kind of put yourself in the best possible position. So there are lots of things to think about in relation to student finance. Also be aware of how much you may be eligible for. So for your maintenance costs, and this gives you an idea of the amount you may receive, and there is a calculator, like it says at the bottom, that you can kind of put in your details and find out how much you might be eligible for. So putting all of that effort into planning now is very sensible, I would say. And as I said, student finance applications are open now, and you can apply online. If you live in Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland, the process will be slightly different. You have a whole other student finance website, so just be aware of that. And obviously, other countries, international students, EU students will have a different funding set up, or will have their own systems for higher education. So do your research into your own kind of situation. But I would advise, as I mentioned, doing this as soon as possible. It can take 6 to 8 weeks. You don't need a place at university to apply. You don't need an offer from university. You can do it and then kind of change your mind about where you're studying or whether to go to university later on. And they will need details on things like your income, or your parents or carers' household income if you are applying for income contingent maintenance loans. So that is a lot of information about student finance, but we can send you a webinar that we've done on student finance, a recording, if you email schools@royalholloway.ac.uk, and that will go into all of this in a lot more detail. So going back to our kind of checklist before you get to university, ensure your tuition fees are paid if you're going to pay them yourself privately, or alternatively make sure that you have set up your student loan application so your tuition fees will be paid. Create a budget. So I've already mentioned this, but it's a really good idea to start kind of budgeting and thinking about how much money you'll have available to you when you get to university now. So practicing that budgeting, thinking about how much you're going to have on a monthly basis, and being prepared. Another thing to look at in relation to finance is getting your student bank account organised. So lots of banks do offer a specialist student bank account, which is got various kind of bonuses or advantages for students. You do need a confirmed place at university before you can apply for a student bank account. So you'll need a letter from UCAS or a letter from the university to say you've got an unconditional place at university. And once you have that, you can apply for student bank accounts. That's a good thing to get organised before you go to university. What else have we got here? Look at things like money saving schemes. So as soon as you've got that, login for your university email address, you can sign up for things like the UniDays website, for an NUS totem card. Sometimes you can get things like that free with your student bank account, so maybe do your research into which student bank account you'd like to sign up for before you get those organised. And also things like a 16 to 25 rail card, so if you want to get the train to university, you can save a third on rail travel with a 16 to 25 rail card. So quite often you can, make it pay for itself if you're just doing 2 kind of expensive trips a term from home. So something to think about. But as I said, we have a whole webinar on this, so just contact us for a recording, and we can send that to you later on. Another thing to think about now is applying for accommodation. So be aware of what the process is for your university of choice, and usually you will only apply for accommodation with your firm choice of university, which makes sense because if we, from a university's perspective, if we were allocating accommodation based on everyone who put us as their insurance choice, then we would be allocating all these rooms, then lots of those people won't come to Royal Holloway, and then we've got, so it makes much more sense to just allocate students who've made their firm choice. So look into how the university that you've chosen as your firm choice allocates accommodation. Do they have accommodation? When does that process open? Are you making sure you're getting your emails from them once they've made you an offer? And so when you're applying for accommodation, think about what's important to you. It's important to kind of give it a bit of thought before you put in that application. So think about things like location. So when I was applying for halls at my university, pretty much my only criteria was not having to walk a long way to my lectures. So I went to Bristol University, and a lot of the halls of residence were up a big hill about 40 minutes away, and they were great for a lot of people. I think they were a great sort of social area, and there are lots of students all in one place, but I did not fancy walking up and down that hill every day, so I decided that the location was the most important thing, and I literally chose the closest hall of residence to where my lectures were. Lots of people will be healthier and fitter and more interested in kind of putting effort into going to their lectures, so they maybe have different priorities than me. Some people might just want to be in somewhere, you know, like beautiful. So a lot of people, well, students will live in Founders Building at Royal Holloway, which is a very beautiful place to live. So some people will just apply for it on that basis. Also think about things like, do you want to have catered or self-catered accommodation? So do you want your meals cooked for you? Again, it's a very personal preference. I went for self-catered accommodation, so there was an extra learning curve in cooking and eating. Or I knew how to eat, but learning to cook and feed myself. Think about things like room size. This wasn't a massive consideration for me, but there is a big variety. And actually, with some halls of residence, there will be different tiers of rooms within a hall of residence. So again, with Founders Building, there are large rooms and regular sized rooms, and obviously the large rooms are slightly more expensive. So that's something to take into consideration if you want a larger room. Maybe if you do, I don't know, yoga or something in your room and you need the space. Think about cost. So this is probably the most important thing for a lot of people in taking into account what they want accommodation wise. So they can, halls of residence can really vary in terms of cost, and you can save money by, you know, not having an ensuite bathroom or not having a double bed or sharing a room can be a lot more affordable, and universities will typically rank all of the accommodation available in bands, and that will be there'll be different price bands. So think about what your kind of ideal price bands will be. I've already mentioned this, but do you need an ensuite bathroom? I don't think anyone really needs an ensuite bathroom, but is that something that's important to you? And think about any other special requirements. If you know, have access needs and you'd like to be on the ground floor, if you need, if you again want to be close to your lectures, if you have any other kind of special requirements, sometimes people will have, you know, like family accommodation if they have children. Make sure you kind of think about that and see what's available for you. But as I said, the application process really varies from university to university, and some universities will allow you to apply for accommodation even if they're your insurance option, but generally it will only be for firm choices. Oh, I've just said that. I've just said all of this. Be aware of deadlines. So I work a lot with applicants, and I have had occasional emails in about July saying, I haven't had any emails about accommodation. Do I need to apply? And actually the deadline has passed for a lot of universities by that point. So make sure if you're not getting emails from your firm choice that you kind of figure out why that's happening. Do Google when the application window shuts. And the process for applying is usually ranking bands, like I mentioned, in order of preference, and then they'll have, you know, a computer algorithm which will go through and allocate people based on their preference. So just make sure you have like a few bands in mind for where you would like to live the most. And then packing is kind of the fun part of going to university, for some people, maybe just for me. But make sure you have everything you need, but not too much. And I think more focus on the not too much. I think some people will overpack, definitely myself included, for university. So it's important to make a list, be organized, and know what you've got to take with you, but don't just kind of, I'm sure no one would, but don't just kind of pack everything you have at home and expect that you'll need it all. Think about really what makes you feel at home. So a lot of people will bring, you know, bed sheets that they have in their bedroom at home, or lots of photos or posters that will make them feel settled in. Talk to future flatmates. So lots of universities will put you in a group with other students so that you can kind of coordinate, because quite often everyone will come with 5 saucepans and then you end up with so many saucepans and not enough room to put it in, and things like that. So you can kind of coordinate on who's bringing this item, and saves you money as well. Think about what not to bring as well. So you don't need to bring A-level textbooks, for example. Quite often you'll have suggested reading lists that won't include A-level textbooks, and quite often they won't be very helpful once you get past a certain point of your degree. And also things like fairy lights and fridges and candles often aren't allowed in halls. So avoid bringing things that are banned. And I have said this a lot in the previous webinar about study skills, but I'll say it again. Don't worry too much about preparing academically. I get a lot of applicants asking me about reading lists and how do I get up to scratch before I get to university. And I think particularly this year, people will be really worried about knowing everything before they get to university, but try not to worry too much. We do provide support and kind of get you back in that learning zone. And rather than learning loads of content, I would actually look at adjusting to university learning more generally. So kind of look at taster lectures online and sort of practice taking notes, and chat to current students to ask them what they wish they'd prepared before they got to university. So we have a website or platform called UniBuddy embedded on our website, where you can chat to current Royal Holloway students and they can kind of say, oh, I wish I'd done this before I got there, and give you advice related to your subject. And you may want to review your personal statement reading, so the things that you've said you know all about in your personal statement, see if you need to kind of have a refresher on that. And think about your strengths and weaknesses. So if you're really bad at like planning out your time, or getting up early in the morning, or your handwriting's bad, think about the kind of things that you can improve on before you get to university, and that will be helpful, and use this time to kind of work on those. And then kind of a list of other random things to think about before you actually get to university. So quite often universities will ask you to enroll online before you get there, especially I think at the moment you will enroll online. So make sure you know how to do that. Again, check you're getting emails from your firm choice. Look at arrival times and term times, and do you need to book a slot? Oh, I think I've got that here. Do you need to book a slot to get to university? How are you getting there practically, transport wise? Join social media groups, follow the Students' Union for your university to see what's happening when you get there, buy tickets to events, and also, like I said, quite often universities will set up social media groups for you to coordinate with people who live in your hall of residence. And I've already said about the event schedule. You may be able to add, once you've enrolled, your university email to your phone, so you'll get lots of kind of information before you actually arrive on campus. You may want to register with a GP and dentist, especially if you're moving quite far away from home. So at Royal Holloway, there's a student health centre on campus, so that's obviously very convenient to enrol with or register with. And quite often universities will, it's very relevant, need you to have your vaccination record up to date, so make sure you have all the details on those, especially at the moment. I'm not sure whether that includes a COVID vaccination at this point, but just make sure your general vaccination are up to date. And I also recommend, if you're really excited, looking at things like student vlogs to find out what to expect in the first couple of weeks of arriving on campus. I'm also going to talk briefly about studying at university, but as I mentioned, I've talked quite a lot about this already. And again, we can provide the recording of our webinar on studying at university. But your department will run a program of induction and social events to get you settled into your subject. So it's not just a launch straight into your subject. They will often have things like peer guidance schemes where you're paired up with a more senior student in that department who will be able to kind of give you guidance on how to settle in relation to your subject. You'll also, odds are that you'll have a personal tutor who is an academic in your department who will be responsible for meeting with you frequently and keeping up to date with how you're finding your studies and settling in. So they're a really good resource to have if you kind of as a first point of contact for lots of things. And study skills, again, you're not expected to be perfect at the start. You may have sessions on how to use your library, how to find online resources. If you want kind of extra support in maybe math skills or referencing, universities will usually have an academic services or academic skills department who will do extra support in those areas. And also things like how to use equipment in your department, how to again use online resources. So lots of universities will have like an online platform like Moodle, and I think the other one's called Canvas that I know about, although I called it Canva last week, which is a completely different thing. I can't remember what the other one's called, but that like an online platform where you submitted assignments and can get reading and things. Lots of universities will have one of those to get used to, and things like avoiding plagiarism as well. So you'll have lots of basic support in those kind of areas. Another thing to be aware of in terms of study skills is that assessment and grading at university is different, and you may have seen this last week if you were in my webinar last week, but you have to get used to kind of thinking about everything as a mark out of 100 essentially, and they will have different terminology depending on the mark. So a first, once again, is a 70 or above out of 100. 2-1 or upper second class honours is between 60 and 69%. 2-2 or lower second class honours is between 50 and 59%. A third is between 40 and 49%, and a fail is anything below 40%. So something to get used to. Is more of a terminology thing than anything else. And you may have formative and summative assessments, which are basically practice and actual assessments. So it's again slightly different terminology. And you can be assessed in lots of different ways, again at university, so exams, coursework, presentations, lab work, etc. So just be aware of kind of how your course is structured in terms of assessments. And just generally, university does require more from you compared with college or school, so you have to be a lot more independent. I think you hear this every time you go up a kind of level in your education. You're told you need to be more organized and more independent, but it's really true, and can be difficult at the beginning to kind of get used to, but you will develop those skills over time. So again, think about how your course is structured, know what's coming up and when. And think about tools like apps. So I'm very much like a list person, so I love like to-do list apps, but maybe apps that will help you monitor your screen time, or a calendar app to sort of track, I think I've got it, yeah, calendars and diaries are really helpful. Find out just kind of how you work best. And then think also about your practical skills. So these are all kind of things that you need to be more confident in doing. So being able to work to deadlines effectively, note taking, being able to speak up and confident to ask questions in seminars, I think is an adjustment for a lot of people. So you have to be kind of more confident in being able to speak up if you don't understand something, for example. And then writing and research skills. Again, we sort of talk about this in the other webinar, which again, I'll tell you how to get a recording of that at the end. Another thing that I think some undergraduates that aren't used to is reading your emails every day. So you know, if there's a room change or a deadline change, you'll get that notification through email. So just get in the habit of checking your emails every day. But I'm sure a lot of people in this webinar are very organized and on it, so do that anyway. And then outside your studies, so this is kind of everything outside of the classroom that I'm going to talk about now. And I have actually picked this graph from the Queen Mary's website, but I thought it was a really good kind of demonstration of how a lot of people will transition to university, and it isn't true of everyone. Everyone has kind of a slightly different experience, but what it really emphasizes is that it's okay to have a bit of a dip when you first get to university, and maybe a bit of anxiety or homesickness, and that's completely normal. I definitely can say from personal experience, I had a bit of a jolt when I got to university for the first time, and for vast majority of people that doesn't last very long, and it is really temporary, and you do then get, you know, up to a new high, as it shows on the emotional roller coaster of enthusiasm, and you do thrive at university. So just be aware that it's okay to have a bit of a kind of shock when you're adjusting to getting to university, but you will get through it very quickly, and a lot of people will be in the same boat. So just quick notes on adjusting. So as I said, homesickness, nerves, anxiety, ups and downs are completely normal when you first arrive at university. I think I found a statistic that around 50 to 70% of students experience homesickness when they start. That's just a normal part of adjusting to a new experience, especially if you're moving away from home. Don't think that I'm guaranteeing. A lot of people maybe will just get to university and be like, great, this is fantastic, I'm living on my own. But some people will experience a small amount of homesickness. So how do you kind of manage that? Think about things like staying healthy, exercise, eat a balanced diet, throw yourself into university and all of the opportunities available, get to know your housemates or course mates, spend time with people, go on, go to parties, have lunches together, cook together with your flatmates, go to as many welcome events as possible. Don't worry about making friends too much, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, but try not to worry if some of your flatmates instantly gel, or you're kind of worried about, making friends for life. I can say from personal experience that the people you maybe meet in your first few weeks of university aren't necessarily going to be the people that you spend the rest of your time with at university. You make friends kind of gradually and naturally. So just throw yourself into activities and you will naturally make friends without kind of making loads of effort to make friends. Think about self-care, monitor your mental health. There is a lot of support at university if you feel like you're struggling. And again, make your room feel like home. So make it unique to you, posters and cushions and photos, whatever makes you happy. A few more points on this. So try to get into a weekly routine to keep yourself busy and occupied. A piece of advice that some people say is quite helpful is to avoid too many home visits. Instead, ask family and friends to come visit you at university, which can be kind of help you get settled in rather than going home a lot. Don't make any quick decisions to leave university. Allow yourself time before, to get comfortable and settle in, because as we saw, there can be a bit of a transition period. Speak to people about how you're feeling. I think this is really crucial because you may feel like you're the only person who's ever kind of felt this way when you get to universities, but generally, as I said, 50 to 70% of people have a bit of a kind of rocky start to university. So it's more important to chat to people. You can kind of connect to people and share the burden, I suppose. Chances are you won't be the only person who feels that way. Don't feel pressurized. I really think this is important. You don't have to do any kind of social activities that you don't want to do. Lots of people have kind of different things that they like to do, and so just and I think that's one of the benefits of university, is that it is really there are so many different people who are all thrown together that actually you're bound to find someone who's very similar to you. It offers a lot in terms of like social events and societies. And if you're finding the transition to university difficult, there is lots of support available, and I will talk about that at the end. So when you start university, I've kind of sort of hinted at this, but often teaching won't start straight away. So you'll have all of these transition events and activities before you start the academic side, and that helps you get settled in and find your feet. And the important kind of body in all this is the SU, or the student union. Every university will have a student union, which is the place you go for student life, basically outside of your studies. So the Hall of Residence or Student Union will put on a programme of welcome events, welcome activities. So I've got a selection of Royal Holloway's activities that they run. A lot of these are in ordinary years, and I've got some examples of things they've been doing this year instead. And all of these are to suit different people. You don't have to go to everything. You can kind of just go to the things that you fancy. But again, I'd really recommend trying things out and throwing yourself into all of the opportunities that there are available. Another big part of the first few weeks of university is a freshers fair. It's your chance to kind of see all of the clubs and societies, media groups, other kind of local organisations, all in one place. There's quite often a lot of free stuff. I think that's the main draw personally for Freshers Fair. But also you can try out things, chat to people who are in societies that you might be interested in. So it's a really good thing to get you settled in once again in a university. So this again gives you an idea of all of the different societies that are available at university. So this is Royal Holloway societies. So there are lots of subject related societies, performing arts societies, political interest groups, for people from a particular background who have particular interests. Political groups are a big part of university student union societies. And then lots of other kind of random societies as well. So you can see things like Humans versus Zombies, which is kind of pretty much a fun society, but there'll be maybe more useful societies, things like St. John's Ambulance. There's lots to get involved with. And again, I'm just showing you a selection. There's, I think, 140 societies. There really is something for everyone to get involved with. So do some research what societies are available at the university that you're interested in. And sports, similarly, there are lots of sports available to get involved with, and there are a selection of our sports clubs at Royal Holloway on the slide. And you can see that there's lots of different levels of sport to get involved with at university, so you don't have to necessarily, going to get involved in a really competitive, high quality level of sport. There is non-competitive sport, levels of activity for all levels of ability, and social kind of active events as well. So things like colour run and cycle cinema, where you're powering the cinema on exercise bikes to watch film. So lots of different levels, and they're a really great way to socialise and meet people as well as keep healthy. So what I've got are some SU activities to show you kind of the things that the Students' Union will do at university. So we've got a boat party that they ran. Some ball is a big part of lots of universities' social calendar. They've done society awards at Royal Holloway, so that's where you know the people who have really contributed to university life will be recognised. They'll bring big musical guests onto campus. This, I think, is political. I think this is getting women to vote. So again, student politics is a big part of campus life. I think this is from the Freshers Fair. So again, Freshers Fair is a big thing that the SU organise. Gigs and events on campus are a big part, again, of the Student Union remit. They will do lots of give it a go sessions to give you an opportunity to try out something rather than committing to it for a whole year. I think this is maybe a thing that's new, because when I was at university, there wasn't many petting zoos or animal experiences, but it seems to be a big thing, certainly at Royal Holloway, but I've heard a bit at on other university campuses as well. But there's lots of petting zoos, which can be, you know, a stress relief and a well-being kind of thing. But the SU at Royal Holloway seems to bring a lot of animals onto campus. Here's some more petting zoo pictures. Oh, that's colour run, which I mentioned. So again, kind of casual, fun, active things to get involved with. Pets as therapy. So again, more animals on campus. Pumpkin carving. Housing fair. So SU will provide lots of support with finding accommodation. So in second and third year, when you move into the private rented sector. And also things like having a list of approved landlords, bring landlords onto campus at the housing fair. So the SU will do lots of support with that as well. I think that's the end of my Instagram stalking of the SU. Another thing to really consider getting involved with at university is volunteering, first of all. So volunteering, I volunteered quite a lot at university, and I felt that it was helpful just in terms of getting me out the house and meeting people, but also it gave me a lot of skills and things to put on my CV and references. And also it kind of includes the local area more in your university experience, so you're able to kind of give back to the local community and get to know what it's like outside of the campus. So usually universities will have big volunteering schemes, but also part-time jobs. A lot of people will need a part-time job, but part-time jobs can be a great way to earn extra money, and also again make new friends, put skills on your CV. Royal Holloway offers a part-time jobs fair, as do many other universities, so that's a good way to get a part-time job. Again, I worked for most of my degrees. There's some parts of your university study where you'll want to maybe dedicate time to revision and exams and coursework, but over the summer, through Christmas holidays, that's a really great time to get a part-time job and save up some money for the rest of your time at university. And the final thing, kind of outside of your studies, is just gaining life skills at university. And I think for a lot of people, university is their first time living away from home, running their own life, deciding what to eat. And so actually all of those kind of things on the right hand side are big things that people will be experiencing for the first time. So laundry and budgeting, as I've mentioned a lot, and cleaning is a big learning curve for some people. Shopping, so all of these things, if you're moving away from home for university, will be a big kind of area for development, and also just learning to respect other people. And I'm sure lots of people will know to respect others before they get to university, but when you're sharing space with someone, that is a big kind of opportunity to learn how to share people's personal space and personal items. And also university is kind of one of the most diverse places in terms of people who have different backgrounds or values or opinions, or have come from completely different place on earth to you. So it's a real amazing opportunity to mix with people who you might not otherwise have met, and that again is a bit of a skill to disagree with someone politely, and not have conflict with people. So it's a bit of a kind of mixture of lots of different things on this slide, but there is a kind of you do grow as a person, I would say, at university. And I mentioned that I was just going to talk about extra help if you feel that you would like extra help when getting to university. So first of all, like I think I said this right at the beginning, but lots of universities will offer an academic support centre. So the one at Royal Holloway is called CDAS, and they offer lots of one-to-ones, online resources on academic skills. Especially if you are doing a STEM degree and you'd like help with maths or statistics or numeracy, they will do lots of catch-up sessions on those. If you speak English as an additional language, or English as a second language, I'm trying to work out what that ESOL stands for, but English as a second language, they will provide kind of support to students who would like more help with kind of writing essays in English or accessing learning in English. So lots of additional support, and they have some really great resources online that you can use, as I mentioned. If you have a disability, medical condition, additional learning needs, disability and dyslexia, again, is a big source of help with lots of different things. So if you feel that you will need support in relation to your disability, you definitely can ask. You should be able to flag that on your UCAS form, but if you haven't, you don't have to disclose it. I'd recommend getting in touch with the university before you get to university, so they can put any additional help in place. So they can help with lots of things, so things like study skills support, support from mental health advisors or a mentor, exam access, so extra time in exams or use of a computer, having different formats of materials, so if you need material in Braille, for example, advanced lecture notes if possible, permission to record lectures, a note taker, and accommodation. So I mentioned that some people may have additional needs in relation to accommodation, so make sure your university knows that. So just make sure you're declaring your condition and registering with the disability services team at your university of choice. And also disability and dyslexia can often help with applying for grants such as the Disabled Students Allowance. So that's an extra source of funding from the government that you may be eligible for if you have a disability. And then if you do want to get extra help with well-being, universities have a really good and comprehensive is the word I'm looking for, wellbeing services available. So make sure you're aware of what kind of things are out there. So They will provide support and advice on wellbeing, especially transition. So when you're first getting to university, they'll do lots of campaigns and events to promote wellbeing. So things like bringing petting zoos onto campus, and often we'll be able to refer you to more specialist teams if necessary. So make sure you know what wellbeing services are out there and how to access them. There are other sort of forms of wellbeing support as well. So things like we have a Halls Life team at Royal Holloway who will, if you're living on halls, keep you as healthy and happy as possible. Also, the SU will have some kind of advice and support. So if you want to go to someone kind of not explicitly related to the university, for example. So there are other forms of support as well. So just finally, I'm on to the fifth section, there are still applicant events sort of running during COVID. So have a look at things like Uni Taster Days, university websites, if you would like to maybe get a taste of your subject before you come. Uni Taster Days is where we have all of our online events and hopefully some in-person events in a few months that will help you kind of ease into university life. And also universities have done their best to keep all of the services I've mentioned throughout this webinar going during social distancing and the pandemic. So things like having wellbeing and advice sessions and academic support through, Zoom or online rather than in person, but the support is still there. Also being able to visit the library. We've been doing things like offering book deliveries or having you book a space to study in the library, so we kind of monitor who's coming and going. Socially distance events, so you can see we had a socially distanced film viewing in Founders Building in the picture on the right hand side. Webinars like this one, so for various social things and also sort of well-being and support, and a lot of those things have moved online. We had a virtual careers and placements fair, so instead of having an in-person fair, it was a virtual one, and things like, which happens anyway, but creating accommodation group chats so you can meet your housemates before you actually get onto campus, and that should happen regardless of COVID. It's quite a helpful thing to have. So there is a lot of work going into trying to ensure the transition to university during the pandemic is as easy as possible, and hopefully things will be kind of slowly returning back to normal in the next few months. And if you are going to university in this year, so 2021, things will be slightly more normal, but obviously you can't guarantee that. So that brings me to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for listening.